दिस, आपको लगता है या आर्यन होना एक रेस है? सोचिए, एक्चुअली साइंस की दुनिया में इनका रेस से कोई लेना देना नहीं है।
वियर्ड है ना?
बिल्कुल। बेसिकली रेस वर्ड जो हम रोज सुनते हैं उसका साइंटिफिक मीनिंग बिल्कुल अलग है। आज हम इसी कॉन्सेप्ट की गहराइयों में उतरेंगे दोस्त।
हाँ।
We're going to break down what race actually means according to science and most importantly why that science completely debunks racism. So अपनी क्यूरियोसिटी को ऑन कर लीजिए।
जरूर।
और हाँ, इससे पहले कि हम इस फैसिनेटिंग जर्नी में खो जाएं, मेक श्योर यू हिट दैट सब्सक्राइब बटन, बेल आइकॉन को जरूर ऑन कर दो एंड लाइक करना तो बनता है।
एब्सोल्युटली। आज की हमारी चर्चा का रोड मैप बिल्कुल क्लियर है, एक लर्निंग एडवेंचर की तरह।
ओके,
सबसे पहले हम समझेंगे कि रेस का बायोलॉजिकल कॉन्सेप्ट आखिर है क्या।
द वेरी बेसिक्स।
राइट। नेक्स्ट हम दुनिया के मेजर रेशियल क्लासिफिकेशंस को देखेंगे, पहले फिजिकल ट्रेट्स के बेसिस पर, फिर ज्योग्राफी के बेसिस पर।
गॉट इट।
Then we'll dive into the specific tools, मतलब the morphological and genetic traits used for this classification.
The how to part.
Exactly. और सबसे important, हम racism के myth को scientifically deconstruct करेंगे और UNESCO के landmark declarations को भी समझेंगे. Finally, we look at a real-world case study about the Negrito element in India to see how all this science works in practice. So, let's get started.
Topic 1. The race concept. It's all about biology and genes. Broad micro-theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. So, first things first. Race biologically है क्या? जब एक साइंटिस्ट रेस कहता है, उनका मतलब क्या होता है?
आदान प्रदान या तो होता ही नहीं या इतना स्लो होता है कि उनके बीच जेनेटिक डिफरेंसेस बने रहते हैं।
अच्छा।
It's not about how you look at a glance, it's about what's happening at the genetic level over a very very long period of time.
Right.
तो एक सिंपल एग्जांपल लेते हैं, इंडियंस या जर्मन्स नेशनल ग्रुप्स हैं, दे आर नॉट रेशियल ग्रुप्स।
Exactly.
सिमिलरली बुद्धिस्ट्स या प्रोटेस्टेंट्स रिलीजियस ग्रुप्स हैं, और ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। आर्यंस या ड्रेविडियंस लिंग्विस्टिक ग्रुप्स हैं, लैंग्वेज के आधार पर। साइंस इन्हें रेस नहीं मानता। Race is a purely biological concept defined by genetics, not by the language you speak, the god you worship, or the passport you carry. Okay, let's unpack this थोड़ा और। जब हम race word सुनते हैं तो हमारे दिमाग में social ideas आते हैं, right? Skin color, countries, cultures.
हाँ, बिल्कुल।
But anthropology, the science of humanity, इसे completely differently देखता है. It's not about society, it's about gene pools.
Gene pools.
ये distinction बहुत जरूरी है. By defining race biologically, science इसे social and cultural label से अलग करता है, जो अक्सर prejudice का कारण बनते हैं. It's all about clarity.
ठीक है, so let's get into the core logic. सोर्स के हिसाब से 4 मेन क्राइटेरिया है। पहला है ग्रुप ऑफ पॉपुलेशन। इसका मतलब है कि हर पॉपुलेशन का अपना यूनिक जीन पूल होता है विद डिफरेंट जीन फ्रीक्वेंसीज। सो टेक्निकली हर गांव एक रेस हो सकता है।
Exactly, which brings us to the second criterion, genetic differences. एक रेस की पहचान होती है कुछ जीन्स की हाई फ्रीक्वेंसी और कुछ की लो फ्रीक्वेंसी से।
ओके।
और ये डिफरेंसेस सिलेक्शन या चांस से आते हैं। फॉर इंस्टेंस, अ पॉपुलेशन लिविंग इन हाई माउंटेन्स might over centuries develop a higher frequency of genes that help with oxygen absorption.
Oh wow.
That's natural selection at work.
Super interesting.
तीसरा क्राइटेरियन है reproductively isolated. मतलब पॉपुलेशंस के बीच फिजिकल या कल्चरल बैरियर्स की वजह से जीन फ्लो लिमिटेड होता है, जैसे एक समुंदर या एक बड़ा पहाड़।
Right. But and this is key. ये आइसोलेशन एब्सोल्यूट नहीं है। जब ग्रुप्स मिलते हैं तो हाइब्रिडाइजेशन होता है। We are all one species after all.
And finally, criteria number 4, the big one. It's a biological concept. This ties everything together. Race is identified by gene frequencies that result from these 4 forces: isolation, hybridization, selection, and mutation. It's a dynamic, ever-changing process, not a fixed, pure category.
Right. Not static.
बिल्कुल. To sum it up, the scientific concept of race is just a tool to study human biological variation. Nothing more, nothing less.
चलो ठीक है, क्रॉस क्वेश्चनिंग टाइम। एक सवाल है, अगर हर पॉपुलेशन का यूनिक जीन पूल है तो क्या हर शहर या गांव को एक अलग रेस माना जा सकता है? You touched on this, but it still feels a bit confusing.
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of the concept of scale. Theoretically, yes, हर गांव एक माइक्रो लेवल पर एक डिस्टिंक्ट मेंडेलियन पॉपुलेशन है.
Okay.
But for a practical, useful classification, anthropologists look for differences that are significant and stable over a very long time. It's a matter of scale. 2-4 गांव के बीच के जेनेटिक डिफरेंसेस बहुत कम होते हैं और उनके बीच जीन फ्लो भी काफी होता है. इसलिए हम बड़े, more stable पैटर्न्स को देखते हैं.
ठीक है, makes sense. Next question. You mentioned reproductively isolated isn't absolute. इसका मतलब क्या है? Can they still have children together?
Of course, absolutely. All humans are one species, Homo sapiens. हम सब आपस में interbreed कर सकते हैं.
Right.
Isolation यहाँ पर biological inability नहीं है. It just means lack of gene flow due to geography or social barriers.
For example?
For example, populations separated by the Pacific Ocean for thousands of years. उनके बीच gene flow almost zero था, इसलिए उनमें unique genetic frequencies develop हुई. But that doesn't mean they aren't the same species.
Got it. Now this is important. तो आर्यंस और द्रविडियंस को लिंग्विस्टिक ग्रुप्स कहना इतना जरूरी क्यों है? What's the big deal?
The big deal is historical misuse. पास्ट में इन लिंग्विस्टिक लेबल्स को गलत तरीके से रेशियल कैटेगरीज बनाकर सोशल हायरार्कीज क्रिएट की गईं।
ओह, अच्छा।
It was a basis for discrimination. साइंस ये क्लियर करता है कि लैंग्वेज और जेनेटिक्स दो अलग चीजें हैं। आप कोई नई भाषा सीख सकते हैं, आपके जीन्स नहीं बदलते। लैंग्वेज इज कल्चरल, जीन्स आर बायोलॉजिकल।
Okay, that's a crucial distinction. Next one. Gene frequency. ये थोड़ा टेक्निकल लगता है. Can you explain it with a simple analogy?
श्योर, इमेजिन दो बड़े जार्स हैं कैंडीज से भरे हुए। जार ए में 90% रेड कैंडीज हैं और 10% ब्लू।
Okay. Jar A is 90% red.
जार बी में 30% रेड और 70% ब्लू है।
Jar B is 70% blue. Got it.
दोनों जार्स में रेड कैंडीज की फ्रीक्वेंसी अलग-अलग है ना?
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
सिमिलरली ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशंस में कुछ जीन वेरिएंट्स की, फॉर एग्जांपल आई कलर या ब्लड टाइप, फ्रीक्वेंसी अलग-अलग होती है। इट्स जस्ट अ परसेंटेज।
That's a great analogy. Final question for this topic. जब दो so-called races hybridize करती हैं, तो क्या होता है? Does a new race form or do the old ones disappear?
A new gene frequency is formed. एक नया यूनिक ब्लेंड। Human history is a story of continuous mixing.
So no disappearance, just mixing.
Exactly. Think of it like this. अगर आप जार A और जार B की कैंडीज को मिक्स कर देंगे, तो आपको एक नए रेशियो वाला जार मिलेगा, एक नई रियलिटी। This is how human populations evolve. हम सब एक ब्यूटीफुल कॉम्प्लेक्स मिक्स हैं।
Perfect. Now pause and practice saying this aloud. Race is a biological concept based on gene frequencies in reproductively isolated populations. Practice.
In short, science defines race by genetic math, separating it completely from nationality, religion or language. याद रखना।
Topic 2. Major races of the world. Broad micro-theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. चलो, अब देखते हैं कि हिस्टोरिकली फिजिकल एंथ्रोपोलॉजी ने दुनिया की पॉपुलेशंस को कैसे क्लासिफाई किया है. They created 4 major groups: Caucasoid, Australoid, Mongoloid and Negroid. It's important to remember, ये historical categories हैं.
बिल्कुल। And let's start with a surprising fact. Under the historical classification of Caucasoid, you'll find people from Scandinavia, North Africa, the Middle East, and even India.
Wait, really? North Africa and India under Caucasoid?
Yes, this just shows how incredibly broad and diverse these categories are. ये हमारी रोजमर्रा के assumptions को challenge करता है।
Exactly. चलो, let's start with Caucasoid. This is a huge group. सोर्स के हिसाब से इसकी सब ग्रुप्स हैं मेडिटेरेनियन, नॉर्डिक, अल्पाइन, ईस्ट बाल्टिक, आर्मेनॉइड, केल्टिक, लैप, पॉलिनेशियन एंड आइनो।
देखो कितनी वैरायटी है।
हाँ।
और इसकी ज्योग्राफिकल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन यूरोप, नॉर्थ अफ्रीका, मिडिल ईस्ट से लेकर पाकिस्तान, इंडिया और यहाँ तक कि पैसिफिक आइलैंड्स जैसे हवाई या न्यूजीलैंड तक है। फिजिकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स में भी बहुत वेरिएशन है। स्किन कलर व्हाइट से डार्क ब्राउन तक, बाल वेवी से कर्ली और हेड शेप लॉन्ग से ब्रॉड तक। बेसिकली एक सुपर डाइवर्स ग्रुप।
नेक्स्ट अप ऑस्ट्रेलॉइड. Some scientists call them archaic Caucasoid because they resemble Caucasoids in some ways.
Archaic Caucasoid. Interesting.
हाँ, इसमें 2 मेन कैटेगरीज आती हैं, ऑस्ट्रेलियन एबोरिजिन्स और इंडिया के कुछ ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स जैसे भील और गोंड, जिन्हें प्री द्रविडियन या वेडोइड भी कहते हैं।
Okay.
द टर्म आर्काइक यहाँ पर एवोल्यूशनरी टाइमलाइन को दर्शाता है कि इनमें कुछ पुराने ट्रेट्स हैं. इट्स अ क्रोनोलॉजिकल टर्म, नॉट अ वैल्यू जजमेंट. ठीक है. नाउ फॉर द मोंगोलॉइड ग्रुप, थिंक ईस्ट एशिया एंड द अमेरिकाज. इसमें आते हैं क्लासिक मोंगोलॉइड, साइबेरिया, टिबेट, आर्कटिक एस्किमोइड्स, इंडोनेशियन मले, साउथ चाइना, जापान, फिलीपींस एंड अमेरिकन इंडियन, अमेरिंडियन.
A very vast group as well.
बिल्कुल. इनके कॉमन फिजिकल ट्रेट्स हैं ब्लैक, स्ट्रेट, कोर्स है, स्कैंटी बॉडी है, प्रोमिनेंट चीक बोन्स एंड ऑफ कोर्स द एपिकैंथिक फोल्ड इन द आईज.
Finally, the Negroid group, जो अफ्रीकन और ओशियानिक डिविजन्स में बटा हुआ है.
अफ्रीकन एंड ओशियानिक.
अफ्रीकन डिवीजन में ट्रू नीग्रोज, वेस्ट अफ्रीका, नाइलोटिक नीग्रोज, नाइल वैली, बैंटू, सेंट्रल साउथ अफ्रीका, बुशमैन हॉटेंटॉट और निग्रिलो, अफ्रीकन पिग्मीज इन द कॉन्गो आते हैं. इनके जनरल ट्रेट्स हैं वुली है, डार्क स्किन, अ ब्रॉड एंड फ्लैट नोज और फेशियल प्रोग्नेथिज्म यानी प्रोट्रूडिंग जॉ.
Okay, cross questioning time. My mind is a bit blown. Pollination and Ainu are listed under Caucasoid. That doesn't fit the common perception at all. इसके पीछे क्या लॉजिक था?
The logic, from the perspective of early anthropologists, was based on certain shared morphological traits, मतलब skull measurements, hair form, etc.
Okay, so measurements.
Yes, उनके डेटा के हिसाब से ये फीचर्स उनकी कॉकोसॉइड कैटेगरी से ज्यादा मिलते थे compared to other categories. It really highlights the limitations of these broad visual classification systems. They were based on the data they had.
The term archaic Caucasoid for Australoids is very specific. What does archaic imply here?
It implies that they possess some features that are considered ancestral or older in the evolutionary timeline of Caucasoid populations.
So it's about time, not development.
Precisely. It's a way of placing them on a historical evolutionary map. It does not mean less evolved or inferior. It just means appearing earlier in the fossil record.
Okay, we need to talk about the epicanthic fold. Can you describe it in simple terms? What is it exactly?
It's a small fold of skin on the upper eyelid near the inner corner of the eye. It gives the eye a particular shape. It's a well-known feature often associated with Mongoloid populations, but it's important to note that it's not exclusive to them and its presence can vary.
ये सारे physical characteristics बहुत generalized लगते हैं. For example, एक ही ग्रुप में skin white से dark brown तक है. So how useful are these visual traits in today's world where populations are so mixed?
That's the critical point, dost. For classifying individuals today, they're less and less useful.
Right.
ये historical categories past की large, relatively isolated populations को study करने के लिए बनाई गई थी. They're about populations, not individuals. Today, genetics gives us a much more precise and nuanced picture.
Okay, last one for this topic. So pygmies in Africa are Negrilo, and in Asia they're Negrito. Is this just a name difference or are they biologically different groups?
It's primarily a geographical naming convention, but they are biologically different. हालांकि उनमें short stature यानी pygmyism का trait common है, वो genetically distinct populations है.
Acha.
They likely adapted to their different forest environments independently. It's a case of convergent evolution, where different groups develop similar traits in similar environments.
Let's practice. Say the 4 major groups aloud with me. Caucasoid, Australoid, Mongoloid, Negroid. Practicing.
In short, anthropology historically used these 4 massive, internally diverse groups to map human physical variation across the globe.
Topic 3. Racial classification on the basis of geographical distribution. Broad micro-theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. Okay, so physical traits के अलावा race को geography के basis पर भी classify किया गया है. A geographer named Garin ने human races को 3 groups में divide किया.
Huh. Geographic races, local races, and micro races. Basically, it's classification by scale. Think of it like a map with different zoom levels. A geographic race is like a whole continent, जैसे Garin's African race or European race.
Okay, the big picture, right?
A local race is a smaller, more isolated region on that map, like the Ainu in Japan or the Eskimos in the Arctic.
More specific.
And a micro race is so small, it's like a single town or a few connected villages, जिसके boundaries fuzzy हैं.
This is interesting. It's not just about what people look like, but where they live. So, Gan's system में 9 geographic races हैं. Amerindian, Polynesian, Micronesian, Melanesian, Papuan, Australian, Asiatic, Indian, European, and African.
Yes, and these are all large populations separated by major barriers like oceans, deserts, or huge mountain ranges.
Exactly.
फिर आते हैं local races. ये छोटी, more clearly defined populations हैं. They can be isolated geographically, जैसे Eskimos, या culturally,
Culturally, how?
जैसे कि Gypsies या Yemenite Jews, जो दूसरी populations के बीच रहते हैं, but they maintain genetic separation due to cultural practices like endogamy.
Oh, that makes sense.
और आखिर में आती हैं micro races, जो सबसे छोटी Mendelian populations हैं. ये गांव से गांव का genetic variation है जिसके बारे में हम पहले बात कर रहे थे.
Okay, first question. Hold on. Garn's list has an Indian geographic race. ये उस Indian national group से कैसे अलग है जिसके बारे में हमने पहले कहा कि वो race नहीं है. थोड़ा confusing है.
Excellent point. It's all about context. Garn, as a geographer, is using Indian here to describe the distinct, large-scale Mendelian population of the entire subcontinent.
So the region, not the country.
Precisely. The gene pool of the region, which has been historically separated by barriers like the Himalayas and the oceans. He's referring to the geographical and genetic reality, not the political entity of the modern country.
ठीक है. What is the practical difference between a local race and a micro race? The line seems very blurry.
The key difference is definability and stability. A local race, like the Ainu, is a distinct, identifiable group with a clear, long history of isolation. You can point to them on a map.
And a micro race?
A micro race is more of a theoretical concept to describe the continuous, subtle genetic variations you see from one village to the next. Their boundaries are almost impossible to define because there is constant low-level gene flow between them.
एक geographer ने ये classification क्यों बनाया? What's the link between geography and genetics?
Geography is the stage on which human evolution plays out. It determines gene flow.
How?
Mountains, oceans, and deserts act as barriers, isolating populations. This isolation allows unique genetic traits through mutation or drift to become more frequent in a local group. So geography is a major engine of human genetic variation.
पहले वाले मॉडल में 4 races थे. इसमें 9 हैं. How do these two systems relate to each other? Are they in conflict?
Not in conflict. They are just different ways of slicing the same cake. The 4-race model is based on morphological types, what people looked like. Gan's system is based on large, geographically cohesive breeding populations. There's a lot of overlap. For example, Gan's Asiatic race would largely correspond to the Mongoloid type, and his European race would be a big part of the Caucasoid type.
Last question. Are these geographic classifications still used by scientists today? Are they also historical?
Much like the 4-race model, this is largely a historical framework. It was an important step in thinking about human variation spatially.
But not anymore.
Today, modern population genetics uses much more sophisticated statistical tools like cluster analysis of DNA to see patterns of human variation. They don't need to draw hard lines or use loaded terms like race. The data itself reveals the clusters.
Let's practice the 3 levels. Say it with me. Geographic, local, and micro races. Practice.
In short, you can classify human groups by their geographical scale, from entire continents down to tiny local populations.
Topic 4. Bases of racial classification. Morphological. Broad micro-theme. Understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. The early scientists ने ये classifications की कैसे? They used morphological bases, basically physical features. इसमें 2 parts हैं. Morphoscopic यानी जो आप देख सकते हैं, और morphometric जो आप measure कर सकते हैं.
Let's start with morphoscopic traits, the qualitative observations. सबसे पहले skin color. ये मेलानिन पिगमेंट पर डिपेंड करता है.
Melanin, right.
मेलानिन हमें यूवी रेडिएशन से बचाता है. इट्स अ ब्यूटीफुल एडेप्टेशन. जहां धूप ज्यादा वहां ज्यादा मेलानिन टू प्रोटेक्ट द स्किन. जहां धूप कम वहां कम मेलानिन ताकि स्किन विटामिन डी प्रोड्यूस कर सके जो बोन हेल्थ के लिए जरूरी है.
Oh, it's a trade-off.
Exactly. And its inheritance is polygenic, मतलब multiple genes work together. It's not a simple single gene trait.
दूसरा morphoscopic trait है hair. यहाँ color, texture and form सब मैटर करते हैं. Color भी melanin से आता है, but form is a major classifier.
हाँ.
Round, common in mongoloids, and ulotrichus. Woolly, kinky, cross-section is flat, common in negroids.
और तीसरा है आई शेप एंड कलर. मेन डिफरेंशिएटर है एपिकेंथ्रिक फोल्ड जो मंगोलॉइड पॉपुलेशंस में कॉमन है. इसके भी 4 टाइप्स हैं. इनर, कंप्लीट, एक्सटर्नल एंड मीडियन.
So detailed.
हाँ. आई कलर डार्क ब्राउन से लाइट ब्लू तक वेरी करता है. डार्क आई कलर इज जेनेटिकली डोमिनेंट ओवर लाइट आई कलर. ब्लू आईज जस्ट मीन देयर इज लेस पिगमेंट ऑन द फ्रंट ऑफ द आइरिस.
Okay. अब measuring tape निकालने का टाइम आ गया. Morphometric traits are all about numbers and indices.
द क्वांटिटेटिव पार्ट.
Yes. सबसे पहला है cephalic index CI, यानी head shape. इसका फॉर्मूला है head breadth multiplied by 100 divided by head length.
सिंपल रेशियो.
हाँ, इससे 3 टाइप्स आते हैं. Dolichocephalic, long narrow head, mesocephalic, medium और brachycephalic, broad round head.
नेक्स्ट इज द फेशियल इंडेक्स. इसमें प्रोग्नेटिज्म, प्रोट्रूडिंग जॉ वर्सेस ऑर्थोग्नेथिज्म, फ्लैट फेस दिखते हैं. इससे भी टाइप्स आते हैं. यूरीप्रोस्कोपिक, ब्रॉड फेस, मीजोप्रोस्कोपिक, मीडियम, लेप्टोप्रोस्कोपिक, नैरो.
So many terms.
आई नो बट द लॉजिक इज द सेम. मेजर एंड क्लासिफाई.
फिर आता है nasal index, यानी nose shape formula, nasal breadth into 100, nasal length. ये एक cool climate adaptation feature है, जैसा हमने डिस्कस किया.
हाँ. प्लेटिराइन, ब्रॉड नोज, गरम, ह्यूमिड क्लाइमेट्स के लिए है. और लेप्टोराइन, नैरो नोज, ठंडे, ड्राई मौसम के लिए.
Right? The built-in heater.
एग्जैक्टली.
और finally, stature, यानी height. Categories, tall, medium, short. But this is heavily affected by environment and nutrition. Example, tall Tutsi versus short pygmies.
Okay, cross questioning. What does polygenic inheritance of skin color mean in simple terms?
My turn. It means skin color isn't controlled by just one gene, but by several genes working together. जैसे a sound mixing board with multiple faders. Multiple genes create the vast spectrum of human skin tones.
Perfect analogy. Next, the nose shape as a climate adaptation is fascinating. How does a narrow nose actually help in a cold climate?
A longer, narrower nasal passage increases the surface area inside the nose. So, जब आप ठंडी सूखी हवा में सांस लेते हैं, तो ये ज्यादा surface area उस हवा को आपके sensitive lungs तक पहुंचने से पहले गर्म और moist करने का टाइम देता है.
Excellent. Third question. If nutrition can affect things like head shape and height, how can they be considered reliable genetic traits for classifying races?
That is the single biggest criticism of these older methods. They're influenced by both genes and environment. That's precisely why modern anthropology relies much more on direct genetic data, which isn't affected by nutrition.
Exactly. What is the point of the 4 different types of epicanthic folds? It seems very detailed.
Well, I guess it shows the incredible attention to detail of early anthropologists. But more importantly, it shows that even within a typical trait, there is significant variation. There's no single uniform mongoloid eye. Diversity exists at every level.
Very well put. Last one. The source mentions harmonic versus disharmonic condition for the face. What does that even mean?
It's about proportion. A harmonic face is one where the face shape matches the cranium shape. For example, a broad head with a broad face.
And disharmonic?
A disharmonic face is when they don't match, like a long head with a broad face. It's just another layer of detailed description they used.
Great job. Practice saying the 2 types of morphological bases, morphoscopic and morphometric. Go on, try it.
In short, early racial classification was a detailed system of observing and measuring physical traits, from skin color to head shape.
Topic 5. Basis of racial classification, genetic. Broad micro theme. Understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. Now we move from what we can see to the genetic level. Genetic criteria are far more precise because they are hereditary and not influenced by the environment. This is where modern science really shines.
इसमें सबसे पहले आते हैं serological criteria, यानी blood related traits. और उसमें सबसे famous हैं blood groups.
The ABO system.
The frequencies vary dramatically. Gene O is most frequent worldwide, but American Indians are almost all O, and gene B is absent in many Australian tribes.
फिर है MNS system, RH system. RH negative blood is rare in mongoloids, but highest in caucasoids, up to 15%. This is important for pregnancy, for HDN disease.
Right. And there are other systems too, like Duffy, Diego, Kidd. Diego positive, for example, is almost exclusively found in Asiatic mongoloid populations. These are powerful genetic markers.
Then there's hemoglobin. और यहाँ आता है सबसे classic example. HBS, the sickle cell gene.
The malaria connection.
Exactly. ये जीन मलेरिया से रेजिस्टेंस देता है, इसलिए ये अफ्रीका के मलेरियल रीजन्स में कॉमन है. It's a perfect example of natural selection in humans. A so-called disease gene can actually be beneficial in a specific environment.
और भी है ना?
हाँ, HB is common in Southeast Asia. HBD Punjab is found in Sikhs and Gujaratis. They all tell a story of local adaptation.
There are other genetic markers too, like isoenzymes and G6PD, serum proteins, immunoglobulins, the list goes on. But the principle is the same. Different frequencies in different populations.
बिल्कुल.
फिर आते हैं नॉन सेरोलॉजिकल क्राइटेरिया, जैसे सीक्रेटर स्टेटस, द जीन एस जो ब्लड ग्रुप एंटीजेंस को बॉडी फ्लूइड्स में सिक्रीट होने देता है, इज हाई इन कॉकोजॉइड्स, या टेस्टिंग एबिलिटी, द एबिलिटी टू टेस्ट पीटीसी केमिकल इज हाई इन कॉकोजॉइड्स एंड नीग्रॉइड्स। और अब आते हैं सबसे मॉडर्न टूल्स पर, ह्यूमन क्रोमोसोमल एंड डीएनए पॉलीमॉर्फिज्म।
This is the really advanced stuff. हाँ, for example, a long Y chromosome is common in Japanese populations और DNA variation में RFLPs है, mitochondrial DNA है. Empty DNA को use करके हम maternal lineage को thousands of years back trace कर सकते हैं. It's like a time machine.
And one more, which is very cool, dermatoglyphics, the study of fingerprints. Believe it or not, fingerprint patterns में भी statistical tendencies होती हैं.
Not rules, tendencies.
Right, general tendencies are. Mongoloid populations tend to have more whorls, Caucasoid populations tend to have more loops, and Negroid populations tend to have more arches.
All right, time to check understanding.
Acha.
First question. Wow, that's a lot of data.
Oh.
Why are blood groups so important for this? What do they tell us that head shape doesn't?
Okay. Blood groups are important because they are 100% genetic. They are not influenced by diet, climate, or anything else. They are non-adaptive. This gives a clean, unbiased look at a population's genetic history. A skull can change shape slightly, but your ABO blood type is fixed from conception.
Perfectly answered. The sickle cell gene and malaria connection is incredible. Is this the best example of natural selection in humans?
It is definitely one of the clearest and most studied examples. Where malaria is common, carrying one copy of the HBS gene gives a significant survival advantage. It shows that a disease gene can actually be beneficial in a specific environment. It's evolution in action.
Great. A word that keeps coming up is polymorphism. Can you break it down for us?
Polymorphism simply means that a trait has multiple forms or variations within a population. Poly means many and morph means form. For example, the A, B, and O alleles are a polymorphism in the ABO blood group system. It's just a scientific term for genetic variety.
Cool. The fingerprint patterns are so cool. Is this a strict rule like all mongoloids have whorls, or is it just a statistical probability?
It's purely statistical, a tendency, not a rule. You'll find all three patterns in all populations, but their frequencies differ. It's another piece of the puzzle, not a definitive label. It adds to the overall picture, but cannot be used to classify an individual.
Last question. With all these precise genetic markers available now, why did early anthropologists even rely on things like cephalic index?
Simple answer. Technology. They used the best tools they had at the time. Measuring skulls was cutting-edge science in the 19th century. Genetics is the cutting-edge tool of our time. They were working with what they had, and they laid the groundwork for what came next.
Excellent. Let's practice a few of these. Say it aloud. ABO system, sickle cell hemoglobin, mitochondrial DNA. Practice.
In short, genetic markers offer a vastly more accurate and objective way to study human population differences than physical appearance. Topic 6. Racism, a total myth. Broad microtheme. Understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. Okay, now for the most important part. We've learned how science defines race as a tool. Now, let's see how that same science proves that racism is a total myth with no scientific basis whatsoever.
This is critical. Racism is the belief that some races are inherently superior to others. This belief rests on four main pillars. Today, hum ek ek karke we're going to knock them all down using science.
Pillar 1. Purity and superiority of blood. The claim is that some races have pure blood. This is totally false. There's no such thing as pure blood. Blood group variations within a so-called race are just as great as and often greater than the variations between races. Plus, pure races don't exist. Human history is one of constant migration and mixing.
Pillar 2. Base of fine color. The claim that skin color determines superiority. This is also completely false.
Right.
Skin color is just an adaptation to sunlight. There is zero correlation between the amount of melanin in your skin and your mental ability, hair form, blood type, or anything else of significance. It's a superficial trait and environmental adaptation.
Sahi baat hai. Pillar 3. Superior mental and physical abilities. The claim that some races are naturally smarter or physically better. This fails on all counts.
Sahi baat hai.
For example, the frontal lobe of the brain, the seat of higher ability, is the same average percentage of total brain weight in all groups. Individual variation is huge, but there's no evidence of one group being inherently superior.
And pillar 4. Cultural superiority. The claim that civilization is the achievement of one specific race.
Oh, this one is.
This is historically illiterate. Civilization is the collective achievement of all humanity. Science, art, philosophy, mathematics, these are human achievements, not racial ones. Her culture ne contribute kiya hai.
ठीक है, चलो. Let's dig deeper. The point that genetic variation within a race is greater than between races seems fundamental. Can you give me an analogy for that?
Of course.
Imagine two different massive libraries. One is called Library Europe and one is Library Asia.
Okay, two libraries.
Both libraries have sections for science, fiction, history, poetry. The proportion of books in each section might be slightly different. Maybe Library Europe has 1% more physics books. But the full range of human knowledge is present in both. The diversity of books inside each library is far, far greater than the average 1% difference between the two libraries. That's what human genetic variation is like.
That's a powerful analogy. Okay, next question. If race is a valid biological concept for studying populations, but racism is scientifically baseless, how do we hold both ideas in our head at once?
We separate the tool from the ideology. Race in anthropology is a descriptive tool to study population variation, like a map that shows where mountains and rivers are.
It's just data.
Exactly. Racism is a hateful ideology that tries to turn that map into a hierarchy, saying mountains are better than rivers. Science provides the map. It does not support the hierarchy.
The text says pure races are nowhere to be found. Does this imply they might have existed in the deep past?
That's a common misconception that racist ideologies often rely on, this myth of a lost purity. But the source clarifies this later in the UNESCO section, stating they weren't found in the distant past either.
Oh.
Human populations have always been moving, meeting, and mixing. The idea of a pure ancestral race is a fantasy.
Why was it so important for racists to push the purity of blood idea? What was so powerful about that?
Blood has always been a powerful metaphor for lineage, inheritance, and identity. It sounds so fundamental, so unchangeable.
Right.
By taming pure blood, they try to create a false biological justification for social and political power, suggesting they were fundamentally, unchangeably different and superior. It was a scientific-sounding excuse for prejudice.
And the refutation of cultural superiority feels like common sense now, but was it a big deal to state it scientifically back then?
Absolutely. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was common scientific and popular belief to attribute the technological success of European nations to their supposed racial superiority.
Wow.
So stating clearly that culture is a learned, shared, and collective product, not a biological one, was a radical and necessary scientific correction.
This is an important one. Pause and practicing. Genetic variation within a human population group is often greater than the average variation between different groups. Practice.
In short, the 4 pillars of racism, pure blood, skin color, superior ability, and culture, all crumble under the weight of scientific evidence.
Topic 7. UNESCO Declarations, 1952. About race. Broad micro-theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. After World War II, the horrors of the Holocaust and scientific racism, the world scientists came together via UNESCO to make a clear, formal statement on race. These declarations are a landmark summary.
Bilkul. This wasn't just one scientist's opinion. This was a global body of experts, geneticists, anthropologists, laying down the facts. Chalo, let's go through the key points one by one.
Number 1. All humans belong to one species, Homo sapiens. Period. That's the foundation.
Number 2. Physical differences are due to a mix of heredity and environment. It's not one or the other, it's both.
Number 3. Hereditary changes happen through mutation and intermarriage, yani gene flow. It's a natural dynamic process.
Number 4. You cannot group race by nationality, religion, geography, or language. We've discussed this, but they made it official.
Number 5. The classifications, Caucasoid, etc., do not imply any superiority or inferiority. They are just descriptive labels.
Number 6. Intelligence plays no part in the classification of races. There is no evidence that any group is innately more intelligent than another.
Number 7. Cultural differences do not cause racial differences. It's the other way around. Culture is learned.
Number 8. And this is so powerful. So-called pure races do not exist now, nor did they exist in the past. It directly refutes the myth of a pure origin.
And finally, number 9. The ethical conclusion of all this science. All human beings are equal and deserve equal treatment.
Okay, let's get into the why. Why was it so critical to make this statement specifically in 1952? What was the historical context?
The world was reeling from the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust, which was justified by a twisted, pseudoscientific ideology of racial purity and Aryan superiority. UNESCO's statement was a direct, global, scientific rebuttal to that horror, and an attempt to provide an intellectual foundation to ensure it never happened again.
Declaration #8 is so strong. Pure races were not found in the distant past. Why is it so important to debunk this lost pure race myth?
Because that myth is often the foundation of nationalist and racist ideologies, the idea of a glorious, pure past that must be reclaimed, usually by excluding or harming others.
Right.
Science says that past is a fiction. Our real shared past is one of constant movement and mixing. Our strength is in our mixed heritage.
The source notes that many authors suggest replacing the word race with ethnic group. What is the difference and why does it matter?
Race is a term loaded with this historical baggage of hierarchy and biological determinism. It's often misunderstood as a rigid biological reality.
Acha.
Ethnic group is a broader, more accurate term that includes shared culture, language, ancestry, and identity. It's seen as less problematic because it acknowledges the cultural component, not just the biological.
Good distinction. Do these declarations mean that studying biological differences between populations is inherently racist?
Not at all. And this is a key point. Studying human biological diversity is a valid scientific field. It helps us understand human evolution, migration patterns, and genetic diseases.
Right.
The declarations simply state that these differences cannot be used to create a hierarchy of value or worth. We can study diversity without ranking it.
Last one for this topic. How much impact did these declarations really have on the general public's views on race? Did they change the world overnight?
Of course not. It was a starting point, not a finish line. They didn't magically end racism, but they provided a powerful tool for educators, activists, and policymakers. It gave the fight for equality the firm, unequivocal backing of global scientific consensus. It changed the argument.
Let's practice the most fundamental point. Say it loud.
All human beings on this hemisphere belong to only one species, which is Homo sapiens. In short, in 1952, the world's scientific community officially and unequivocally declared that racism has no scientific basis and that all humans are one equal species. Topic 8. Negrito elements in India. Broad micro theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. So, to see how all of this works in practice, let's look at a real anthropological debate. For a long time, some scholars argued that a Negrito racial element, like the Andamanese, was a basic, foundational part of the Indian population. Chalo dekhte hain what the evidence says.
This is a classic example of the scientific method in action. A hypothesis is proposed, it's tested with evidence, and in this case, it was ultimately refuted.
So who were the proponents?
The main proponents were Hutton and Guha. Their evidence was primarily morphoscopic. They observed woolly and frizzy hair among some individuals of the Kadar tribe in South India and in some skulls from the Naga hills. Based on this, they argued Negritos were once widespread in India.
So the argument was based mainly on hair texture. What was the counter-argument? How was this hypothesis tested?
There were many counter-arguments. First, critics like S.S. Sarkar argued that sporadic, yani rare, cases of frizzy hair don't prove the existence of an entire racial population. It could just be a random variation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, the famous geneticist R.A. Fisher pointed out that woolly hair can arise from a simple mutation in wavy hair. This means it could have appeared independently in India and didn't need to come from an outside Negrito population.
So what was the final nail in the coffin for this theory?
The real game changer was skeletal evidence. Sarkar did extensive studies in 1959 and concluded that the Kadar people were actually physically very similar to the Australoids of South India, not Negritos. And most importantly, no skeletal remains from the Neolithic to Iron Age in India show any Negrito features. The hard evidence, the bones, just isn't there.
So if not Negritos, who were the earliest settlers?
The consensus now, following Sarkar's work, is that Australoids were the earliest settlers of India, not Negritos.
And why Australoids? What's the evidence for that?
Well, for one, Australoid traits are considered more primitive, meaning they appear earlier in the fossil record, even in Neanderthals, than specialized Negrito traits, like woolly hair.
Okay, so they're older traits.
Yes. And two, there is consistent prehistoric evidence of Australoids in India, including skulls from Mohenjo-daro and other Iron Age sites. And three, Australoids are found all over, from India to Australia, showing a very old and widespread presence.
Okay, let's question this. This whole debate seems to hinge on hair texture. Was that really considered strong enough evidence to propose an entire racial history?
In the early days of anthropology, yes. Observable traits like hair form were considered very important clues. Guha's observation was a legitimate hypothesis starter.
But
as this debate shows so clearly, a single trait is not enough. Science demands multiple lines of evidence, skeletal, genetic, archaeological, to build a strong case.
what makes the Australoid evidence, like the skulls from Mohenjo-daro, so much stronger than the hair evidence?
Because skulls provide a wealth of morphometric data, dozens of precise, repeatable measurements. They're also durable and can be dated accurately. A skull gives a much more complete and reliable picture of a population's physical type than a single potentially mutable trait like hair. Bones don't lie.
The text says Australoids are considered more primitive than Negritos. You mentioned it, but it sounds a bit judgmental. Can you clarify it one more time?
That's a crucial clarification. In an evolutionary context, primitive does not mean inferior or less developed. It is a purely chronological term. It simply means a trait that appears earlier in the evolutionary timeline. It's a statement about time, not value.
So if the consensus is that Australoids were first, is this Negrito debate now completely closed?
Or are there still some who believe it? In mainstream anthropology, the consensus is very strong around the Australoid first model because of the overwhelming skeletal evidence. The Negrito substratum hypothesis is no longer widely accepted. Science moved on when better evidence became available.
Last question. This is a very specific academic debate. Why does it matter to us today who the original settlers of India were?
It matters because it shapes the story of a nation's origins. These anthropological narratives can be used or misused to build identities, make political claims, and define who belongs. Getting the science right and being honest about what the evidence shows is crucial for building an accurate, inclusive historical narrative.
Let's get the conclusion right. Practice saying this aloud. Based on skeletal and prehistoric evidence, The scientific consensus is that Australoids were the original settlers of India.
That early theories of a Negrito presence in India were incorrect, and the evidence points strongly to Australoids as the subcontinent's earliest inhabitants.
What a journey!
Sach mein.
So, let's quickly recap under our broad theme, understanding the scientific concept of race and deconstructing racism. First, we learned that race in science is a biological concept about gene frequencies in populations, not about nationality or culture.
Samjhe.
Right. Then we explored the historical classifications, the 4 major groups and Gan's geographical system, and saw they were broad early attempts to map human diversity.
Important first steps.
We dived deep into the toolkit, the morphological and then the super precise genetic criteria used to study human variation.
The how of it all.
Most importantly, we used that very science to completely dismantle the 4 pillars of racism, proving it is a baseless social myth.
Bilkul.
And finally, the Negrito debate in India showed us the scientific method in action, how theories are tested, refined, and sometimes rejected based on real evidence.
Perfect recap. Now, to make sure all this information sticks, here are 6 small challenges. Try presenting the answer to each one out loud as if you're explaining it to someone else.
Okay, challenge time.
1. Explain the difference between a biological race and a linguistic group like Dravidian. 2. Name the 4 major historical racial groupings and 1 key physical trait mentioned for each. 3. In 1 sentence, explain the climate adaptation theory for nose shape.
Ooh, good one.
4. Why is the sickle cell gene, HBS, a powerful example of natural selection, not racial superiority? 5. Summarize the main scientific argument against the idea of pure races. And finally, number 6, briefly present the 2 opposing arguments in the Negrito in India debate.
Awesome challenges. Today, we saw that the term race is scientifically complex and socially loaded. The sources mention that many scientists now prefer the term ethnic group. This leaves us with a final thought to ponder. The science of human diversity is always evolving. But maybe the bigger challenge isn't just about scientific accuracy. Maybe it's about finding a new language, a new way to talk about our differences that celebrates our incredible human diversity without creating division. What do you think that new language should look like?
Something to think about? We hope this deep exploration was as enlightening for everyone listening as it was for us.
If you loved this deep dive, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a curious friend. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave a comment with your thoughts on our final question, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep learning.